Hello. I want to take this opportunity to give a few comments on the Agatha Christie Facsimile series, which is published by Harper Collins. Really nice editions that they're publishing and which are available now. And specifically, I wanted to talk about the Tommy and Tuppence books. There are 5 of them, and they are The Secret Adversary, Partners in Crime, NRM, By the Pricking of My Thumbs, and Postern of Fate. So I want to look at this first cover here, which is The Secret Adversary, and which is the first Tommy and Tuppence novel to be published, and Agatha Christie's second novel to be published. I just want to look at the cover itself for this video. I don't want to talk too much about the plot. Maybe I'll use another video for that opportunity. But the facsimile editions are the reprints of the first editions of the novel. So you have the actual, you have the covers that are reproduced for these facsimile editions. So you can see here the Secret Adversary by Agatha Christie has this really bizarre cover of a bear wearing a suit, standing in front of a red flag, and the bear has a human hand, and it's holding what looks to be a mask. It looks like a maybe some evil Bolshevik black bearded, kind of with a sinister kind of mustache, eyebrow kind of face mask. It's a really eye-catching cover in that it's just so bizarre. It has really nothing to do with any particular scene in the story itself. You know, there are no bears that appear in this story as far as I can tell, and I've read this story many times. The cover artist didn't choose to depict Tommy and Tuppence, but rather chose to depict this giant bear. Sort of, I mean, we understand why it's here, right? I mean, it's supposed to be, I guess, a metaphor for this the secret adversary. The title is, of course, The Secret Adversary, and the whole plot is basically revolving around Tommy and Tuppence's search for this secret adversary, Mr. Brown. You know, who knows, maybe because the character's name was Mr. Brown, the cover artist decided to use a bear with brown fur. I don't know, maybe that's too much of a stretch. But anyway, it's a real bizarre, unusual cover, but it's eye-catching, and it has a certain, I don't know, a certain sort of charm to it, I suppose. It's aided with it's aided by the nice font that's being used for The Secret Adversary, and Agatha Christie's name is really nicely displayed. Look at that by. Look at the way the Y is stretched out towards the bottom of Agatha Christie's name. Then the next book in the series, as it were, is this one. Partners in Crime, and those of you who know, this is a collection of short stories rather than a novel proper. It's a really good group of short stories, very strong, highly recommended. Let's look at the cover here for a second. We have, for the first time, what looks to be, what we assume to be, Tommy and Tuppence. You have this man and a woman. This man, Tommy, who's carrying a gun, wearing a tuxedo, I think, and wearing a top hat. And we have Tuppence, who's holding a magnifying glass with some books under her arm, wearing a red dress and kind of a flapper look. So, you have this young couple, and they're dressed to reflect the times. It's the early 1920s. But the more we look at this cover, the more bizarre and confusing it becomes, right? Because let's look here, first of all, Tommy's top hat is strange, because you can see coming out of the top hat, we had this sort of strange shadow. It looks like a Nosferatu type of shadow, which is a very odd choice. There's no kind of Nosferatu figure in any of the stories, I don't think, which is odd. Then we have this moon in the background, kind of with a smile on its face. We wonder why the moon is smiling. Then we have this dog, this sort of big dog there. I don't know. I'm not sure. Did they have a dog in any of the stories? I don't think so. And finally, they're in it looks like, where are they? I mean, there's a sign on the left-hand side that says returning at 2:30 a.m., but what does this mean? I mean, the more I look at this cover, the more confused I become. It's a really bizarre, odd cover, it really has nothing to do with any of the stories in this series, in this collection, as far as I can tell. Um, I mean, I guess the only good thing is that we finally see sort of an artist rendition of Tommy and Tuppence, what they look like. But what I think is going on here is just, that the artist didn't really know what the stories were. They probably just had the title, Partners in Crime, and just kind of made this picture up, sort of befitting the title rather than trying to fit into any of the stories proper. But it's bizarre, odd cover. Um, the next book in the Tommy and Tuppence series, as it were, is N or M. Now, for those of you who know, NRM takes place some years later. Now we're into sort of World War II territory. And again, this is a novel. And we have a very simple cover here. We have a kind of a, what looks like a sort of a tan or maroon background. And we have Agatha Christie's name sort of depicted as written in pencil or chalk or maybe even kind of a black powder. And then we have the title sort of written diagonally, N or M, with question mark. Now, for those of you who know, the events of the story begin with this kind of note, sort of cryptically written note, and included in the words of the note are this question, N or M. So you think, well, okay, this cover is probably depicting that. It's probably depicting the letters N or M as they were written on such note that is referenced to at the beginning of the novel, and then thus sets into action the events of the novel. So it's a very simple cover. I mean, there are no pictures of any bears or any, Nosferatu shadows or smiling moons or anything like that. It's a very simple, straightforward cover. I think what's going on here is that I think the title NRM, I think, is a very difficult title to match into any kind of uh, pictorial depiction. Uh, it's not the best title in the I'm sorry, it's not the best cover in the facsimile series collection by far. I think it's simple, but sometimes it's just too simple. It would have helped to be if there was maybe a house or something like that. But it's not a terrible title. And that it does seem to have a kind of a thematic link to the actual events of the story, namely this note on which was written the cryptic letters, the cryptic question N or M. So it's not a bad cover per se, but it's not the best one, that's for sure. But that's N or M. And the next novel in the Tommy and Tuppence series is By the Pricking of My Thumbs. Now, By the Pricking of My Thumbs comes later. I believe it comes in the late 1960s. And Tommy and Tuppence are older. And we have a cover which is it's very consistent with the books that were being published at this time, the 1960s. By this time, the covers don't have any kind of picture or any kind of artist rendition of any scene in the book. Rather, we have merely the title, which is set on some plain color background, and we have Agatha Christie's name prominently displayed. And so that's what's going on here. We have Agatha Christie's name in very bold font at the very top in black, and we have a yellow background. And then we have on the bottom right-hand corner of the cover, we have the title, By the Pricking of My Thumbs, in a sort of a kind of an interesting font choice. Now, it's interesting because By the Pricking of My Thumbs, I think as a story, it lends itself very nicely to some interesting cover art. Without giving too many spoilers away. I mean, there are certain images in the story. There are certain themes in the story. Characters that seem to be, they might be witches, or they're kind of dolls and old ladies and graves and sort of almost sinister undertones. So those elements would seem to lend themselves nicely to any kind of sort of interesting artwork for a cover. However, it's kind of No, it's a little bit disappointing that we have just this very simple cover for such a kind of a compelling story as By the Pricky of My Thumbs. All the same, we have to understand that this is consistent with the times, late 1960s. Probably the tastes of those times meant that we didn't have any picture that was gracing the cover. Um, by the pricking of my thumbs on a yellow background. Blech. But again, not the best one, but it's better than nothing, I suppose. Then we have the final novel in the Tommy and Tuppence series, which is Postern of Fate. Here we go. Now we have, finally, after some, very plain covers, the NRM and By the Pricking of My Thumbs, we finally have a return to sort of the picture, the cover depicting a fence. Looks like a fence in some kind of garden or some English countryside setting. So those of you who know the story know that there's some sort of thematic significance to this picture. So it's not a sort of a random picture like we saw with the Secret Adversary. It's also fitting to the title itself, Postern of Fate. And then we have Agatha Christie's name prominently displayed on the top. It's we look very closely at this cover, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but you notice with these covers, unlike the Hercule Poirot or Miss Marple stories, there are no mentions on the covers of a Tommy and Tuppence novel or a Tommy and Tuppence collection of stories. The Hercule Poirot books sometimes or very often had a Hercule Poirot novel. Miss Marple's stories too had something similar, a Miss Marple novel or something of that sort. But here we don't have any of that for Tommy and Tuppence. I think that's maybe a reflection of how popular or their lack of, maybe relatively speaking, their lack of popularity compared to Hercule Poirot. But it's not a bad cover, Postern of Fate. It's difficult because Postern of Fate is not considered to be one of Agatha Christie's strong novels. In fact, it's considered to be one of her weaker ones. So I don't know if this novel gets a lot of attention that it deserves. I don't think it's that bad, actually. I think it's pretty interesting. But just keeping my comments here reserved to the cover, I think it's it's sort of it's an interesting cover, but it's very it's kind of sort of you think, oh, it's interesting, but it doesn't give you that sense of mystery, or it doesn't kind of draw you in as some of the earlier covers do. Nevertheless, it's a nice to see the return of the picture adorning the cover. That's all I have to say about the Tommy and Tuppence novels of this. Thank you very much for listening. Take care.